This is American Dreams, a program where we interview thought leaders and entrepreneurs and bring their ideas to you in real-world context. Welcome to today's show. I'm here with Steve Krein today. Steve, it's good to have you with us.
It's great to be here, Alan. Great to see you today.
You've done a lot in your life and bringing up where you are today, but can you give us a timeline of your decisions, your education?
It really does harken back to the way I was brought up, not by entrepreneurial parents, but I watched my father when he turned 50 get laid off. And it had an incredibly profound impact on my life, but not in a negative way, in a very positive way. It was really a unique inflection point for a 10 or 11-year-old to kind of ask the question about how do you make sure this doesn't happen to me, but more importantly, how can I make sure that I have the ability to control my destiny? And so that led me through, as I was growing up before moving to New York, through a series of entrepreneurial ventures. I wouldn't call them businesses, but always found a way to make money, to buy things that I wanted, to have the ability to create from scratch. And I ended up having, in my third year of law school, a wonderful professor who asked me to join him in exploring how lawyers in particular could be brought onto the internet. Again, it was 1994. And so I found myself in not only deep dialogue with him, but actually we ended up launching in Delaware a very local online service for lawyers, which ultimately ended up paving the way for me to have this opportunity in New York. And Richard Herman, who was the professor of mine at the time, sat down with me and actually my parents when I had this opportunity to move to New York and take this role building the Law Journal, and asked me a couple of questions, one of which was, where did I see myself and my life 25 years from now? And nobody ever asked me that before, but it was a really unique moment to share what I believed was a very important moment in time, which was the birth of the internet that I knew was going to be transformational. And that ultimately ended up becoming a launching pad for my move to New York and my taking that role. And while I probably wasn't in that role for more than 6 months, right after graduation, I ended up getting some seed financing from the publisher of the Law Journal to start my first company. Called webstakesandpromotions.com, which was an internet company designed to help engage people at a time when people were not really sure how to engage online. And over the course of the subsequent 4 or 5 years, and I was in my mid to late 20s through that period, I built the company with one of my best friends, one of my partners now, and a great team, which we ended up taking that company public and selling it pretty quickly. It's actually when I joined Strategic Coach, which is how you and I met. But those first 30 years, if I was to sum them up, really were about laying the groundwork for what would end up becoming a lifelong obsession with entrepreneurship, entrepreneurs, mindset of the entrepreneurs, and this unique freedom that we have as entrepreneurs to create and design our own future. I reflect on those first 30 years, and I just turned 51 last month, but I look at those first 30 years and I think about it. I have 3 daughters who are teenagers right now, and I think about how pivotal of a time in your life it is, but it really was all of the ingredients that would ultimately lead me to what I'm doing today. And so a lot of that reflection that, I had a chance to share with you is very important to my story.
Couple takeaways. First, the uniqueness of what you do coming out of law school. And while most law graduates are looking to a law firm to associate with, you're out there ready to start companies. And it tells about your entrepreneurial spirit. You've ended up in the course of things having a certain concentration into the healthcare industry or health startups. And can you tell us how you went about falling into that industry? Was it by design? Was it by accident?
It's an interesting question because as I mentioned, that first company was a a direct marketing technology company that ran online sweepstakes and promotions. It had nothing to do with healthcare. But a couple of things kind of planted some seeds in my mind. One of them was the fact that my brother is he's a head and neck cancer surgeon. He was in medical school and residency at the time. My mother is a nurse and a physician's assistant. So I grew up around healthcare. And during one of those moments while I was building Webstakes, I was on the Today Show on NBC, and we were doing a promotion and giving someone a chance to win $1 million, something very nebulous. But at the end of the show, I actually, was on with Katie Couric and all the team over there. And at the end of the show, I called up my brother and I asked him if he had seen the episode and seen the show. And at the time, you didn't have things being recorded like you do now. But I'd asked him, and he kind of chuckled and said, "No, actually, I was in the OR saving someone's life while you were giving money away on TV." And it was interesting because it actually, like a big brother does, pushing on buttons, but it actually sat pretty heavy with me that I was building a company and working every day almost as a mercenary to go out and drive towards this idea of creating a successful company. But actually, the company wasn't doing anything meaningful to change the world or make a real impact. And I think that was the first time I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great to turn my entrepreneurial efforts towards something more meaningful than doing sweepstakes and contests and instant win games? And if I was to fast forward probably 6 or 7 years after selling that company, I found myself in a conversation with one of my investors from that company who had been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And in the discussion with him, we were talking about things that he could find or his family could end up finding online, discovering using the internet. And I was like an internet guy, but of course not a doctor. And so when I left that meeting, I called my brother, I asked him for some help. And over the course of a couple of conversations and also a conversation with my now partner, Unity Stokes, we ended up creating an idea for helping people like, his name was Ian Berg, and others who need to get access to information that you can't just find by a Google search or at the time a Yahoo search. And really in, I think, a matter of weeks, found myself thinking about being an entrepreneur in healthcare and doing something meaningful like I was helping Ian. And it really enabled me to think about going and shifting my entrepreneurial activities from being a mercenary entrepreneur to a mission-driven entrepreneur. And that gave way to me launching what I would call one of the early first-generation digital health companies called Organized Wisdom. And through a couple of turns of Organized Wisdom and growth of Organized Wisdom, ended up really finding a much bigger problem to solve that I wanted to turn my attention to. And Unity and I, along with our team, shifted Organized Wisdom into what is now Startup Health. And in 2011, really took all of our DNA from what worked and what didn't work in those early years and created a new 30-year mission for ourselves, which would be to invest in and organize and support a global army of entrepreneurs like ourselves who are working on changing healthcare, but do it as a global army, a community working together and collaborating. And so I can only look backwards and see how all of these dots got connected, but I found myself in healthcare really as a result of looking inward and trying to make sure that I was going to spend, and now have spent, all of my years going forward. And I now can say, it's a lifelong passion towards doing something that's going to make a real impact on people's lives.
Steve, we're in a world of constant change. And so these critical thinkers such as yourself and the entrepreneurs you work with are often thinking about putting new solutions in place. In the venture community, the venture capitalists, although they're Harvard or Stanford or Ivy League school graduates, they usually make it only 1 out of 7 companies.
Yeah.
So I have to ask the question. So when you're working with these entrepreneurs, you're saying, hey, Steve, I got a great idea. I got a great concept. How do you vet them? What are you looking for?
So if I go back to, it's about 10 years ago, literally next month, that we launched Startup Health. And I mentioned this mission that we are on. It's not a mission to pick a bunch of winners early on and bet on them. It's actually something I think more critical to the equation of improving the health and well-being of everyone in the world. And it's to make a lot of bets in a lot of entrepreneurs based on what is at the very early stages, very little data and information. And so we, at the very beginning, knew that if you were going to really evaluate entrepreneurs at the seed or pre-seed stage, in the very early stage, and decide who to invest in and support, you need to really look at something that transcends the company that they're building, and that is their mindset. The entrepreneur's mindset, the team's mindset, as it relates to what they're really trying to achieve and work on. And so we very much focused in 2011 and as much today in 2021 on what is the mindset of the entrepreneurs building the company. How ambitious are they? How committed are they? How resilient are they? How supported are they? How do they think about their own health, physical and mental? How do they think about their communication? How do they think about their thinking? What kind of energy do they put off? And you and I are both in strategic coach and understand the power of what we've both been educated around being able to assess a mindset. And so we have developed a series of scorecards to evaluate every investment decision. And we've used and refined that scorecard a lot over the last 10 years to make decisions to invest now in 355 or 360 companies in 26 different countries, using a mindset scorecard, really a series of mindset scorecards. The first one being about the team and the entrepreneurs. The second one being about the company and almost the mindset of the company and a whole bunch of characteristics about what the company's working on. And then even have a mindset about the people who are backing those companies, the investors or co-investors with us. And so we have a deep appreciation for conversations that help us get to know people on something other than what they're building, but how they think.
So moving forward in looking at what you do, you're obviously working on with individuals or entrepreneurs. You're trying to put solutions in place that we'll see maybe 3 to 5 years down the road. Give me some examples of some of the solutions that companies are working to provide, that companies you're currently working with.
Sure. So I mentioned we've invested in 360 or 65 companies. The reason I'm a little loose on the numbers because about 10 new companies every quarter we add to the mix. There's about 250 of those 350 companies that are still active. A couple dozen of them have been acquired. Some for a lot of money, some for nothing. But more importantly, the solutions that they're working on are incredibly impactful and visibly impactful, even at the early stages. One of the companies that I think is easy to explain and see is the power of connecting a pill bottle to the internet, to the cloud. A company called AdhereTech, which is invented a smart pill bottle. And just like your Kindle is constantly connected to the internet to download books, this pill bottle is constantly connected to the internet to look at medication adherence. Is the medication being taken on a regular basis at the right time, in the right amount, whether it's liquid or pill form? Connecting devices like that is a new frontier that over the last 10 years, even more so in the last 2 years since COVID, has become a lifeline to learning about the behavior of patients and the adherence to medications and important drugs that they need to be taking. And so it's informing the doctors, the other clinicians, the family members even, about the health and well-being of the patient in real time. So that's kind of a really useful kind of theme across our entire portfolio, which are connected devices, smart devices that are previously not smart devices. There's a lot of companies building new types of sensors in the home to monitor people as they're at home. Elderly people, are they getting out of bed? Are they opening up their refrigerator? Are they taking and eating and being cared for? Are they getting up and out? So that remote monitoring of patients is just the tip of the iceberg. How do we make sure that we can take care of patients out of the hospital? We have a number of companies working on those kinds of solutions. We also have some companies really looking at how to care for pregnant, expectant mothers along the entire spectrum, not just during visits. We have a company called Baby Scripts, which is monitoring at the very time someone finds out they're pregnant, all the way through to childbirth, the health of the mother and the unborn baby. And their mission is to eliminate unnecessary preterm death in infants. And the idea of learning about things we never had the ability to learn from being done in a unique and novel way. We also have companies looking at very old school businesses like insurance and recreating how we think about taking care of the insured population or the uninsured, previously uninsured, now with Medicare or Medicaid. We have a great company called Devoted Health, which has reimagined how to apply and take care of people who are being, in a lot of cases, underserved. They have created a program to invest in, with love, taking care of their population of elderly clients by making sure that rather than trying to reduce the cost of monitoring those patients, they are actually investing in taking care of their home, improving things like their bathtub so that they don't slip and fall, making sure that you can walk up and down the steps in their home. And so they're really reinventing the Medicare Advantage space by really thinking very differently than traditional insurance companies.
You know, it's fascinating. You mentioned 350 investments and 250 active, and you see this whole cross spectrum of all these new innovative technologies. The last year, I guess, when these entrepreneurs start out their solutions, one thing they can't control is environment. COVID-19 has clearly made a disruption into the healthcare environment. So what companies have you seen emerge? And I want to go a step further on this to say, have you seen a change in the direction of regulation?
Yeah. I'm actually surprised it took us this long to get to this topic, because there's really a new historical divide before COVID and after COVID in all of our lives. But in healthcare in particular, I think education as well, there's been a significant line drawn between what people used to see as a luxury or a nice to have, and now is a need to have. And the solutions, or in the case of products and services, the lifeline for many people is digital connectivity, digital connection, remote monitoring. So for entrepreneurs who were building companies before COVID, there was a very, very, very long sales cycle to convince, if you will, leadership and organizations to adopt your solutions, your telemedicine solutions, your connected devices solutions, your remote monitoring solutions. And then in a matter of weeks, a year and a couple months ago, everything changed with COVID, and telemedicine and being able to take care of people remotely became the only way people are going to be taken care of. And so there was almost a wholesale rewrite of customer adoption and needs that had to be served and solved by the companies that were being built and now are being built. And so for that generation of entrepreneurs who were building companies back in 2008, 10, or 12, they have a very different runway than the companies that started in the last couple of years, or even companies that have started this year. And so there's a number of things in 2021 that entrepreneurs have the ability to do that they didn't have the ability to do before COVID, or even in the years prior to that, around platforms and software and networks that they could take advantage of and build on. And so Amazon Web Services, the iOS or any of the Apple development kits or Google development kits that entrepreneurs can now access, artificial intelligence and other machine learning technologies available in the cloud through Microsoft, Amazon, and Salesforce. All of these kinds of tools means that entrepreneurs can build things for a fraction of the price and a fraction of the time and get to market with a product much sooner and begin to scale and get some of those early customers to scale much, much quicker. And so that has created an entire acceleration, if you will, of the funding and the adoption, as I mentioned, for a lot of these companies. And so we saw more money invested into these health innovation companies in the first quarter than we did in the first 3 years that we were doing startup health combined. There was more money invested, about $8 or $9 billion in the first quarter than was invested in all of 2016. And so there's a very important shift in the appetite for investors, payers, providers, and pharmaceutical companies, and their willingness to work with smaller, innovative companies and startups that are now serving a real need.
Investing in these new early stage startups, what's the average size of the investment that you make?
So we have a standard offer for all seed stage and pre-seed stage companies, which is a $200,000 equity package for 2% equity stake in the company. And we are not a traditional investor when we invest. We actually really focus on supporting the companies as they build towards their health moonshot. So we built a platform and a community that's designed to help the entrepreneurs persevere, stay resilient, and cultivate that mindset that I said was such a critical part of being successful. And so we have one part peer network, one part media company, which is designed to tell the story that of the entrepreneur's progress so that they can attract the investors, customers, and partners, and then a curated stakeholder network of angels, VCs, corporate VCs, foundations, payers, providers, pharmaceutical companies that are interested in these kinds of solutions. And so by bringing community and broadcast and network together, our belief is that the entrepreneurs get from Startup Health something they can't really get anywhere else, which is a global community and platform that is aligned with them on their long-term success. And so we have probably 500 co-investors in our companies. Our companies have raised close to $3 billion. There's a tremendous focus for us, not on the amount of money we invest as much as being really aligned as thought partners and collaboration partners for the entrepreneurs building the companies. And therefore, whether it be coaching, whether it be community, whether it be broadcast, it's all designed to make sure that the entrepreneurs can long-term be successful at not just the financial return of their company, but the impact that they're trying to make.
Is there a geographic location that you're concentrated in?
No, very much global. We have companies in 26 different countries, over 6 continents. We think it's very important to be global in this conversation and in this strategy because nobody knows what's going to work and what's not going to work, but what's being played with, experimented, and executed on all around the world is so different, region to region, country to country, even city to city, that we're trying to unlock the silos that have historically existed where somebody living in New York City or somebody living in Tel Aviv or somebody living in Helsinki, Finland might not be thinking about. And so cross-germinating those ideas and those conversations, whether it be business model, whether it be investors, whether it be technologies, is really the key to unlocking the wisdom of the crowds or the network effect from connecting all of these individuals and organizations together.
So the funds that are doing the actual investor or the investments, are they evergreen funds, or are you setting up venture partnerships?
Yeah. So our first two funds were traditional closed-end funds. We are backed by accredited investors, qualified investors, strategic organizations, and family offices. So Novartis, Chiesi, Ping An on the big strategic side, Steve Case, Mark Cuban, Brad Feld, Esther Dyson on the individual side, lots of families and family offices as well. We finished our last investment out of our last fund at the end of March, and on April 1st launched what is actually a new model around a rolling subscription fund that is evergreen. It's a quarterly fund model that enables us to bring in new investors every quarter and continue adding to what really is an potentially infinite amount of capital to invest in these companies. And so our rolling fund, which you can find more about at healthmoonshots.com, describes how investors can now invest with us in all of the deals that we invest in automatically with this rolling fund. And as a result, democratize the ability to back Health Moonshots, which is really a unique moment to be able to do, because traditionally a lot of the deals, if you will, have been captured by venture capitalists and private equity investors, in other words, but has not been available to typical accredited investors who might want to invest $25,000 a quarter, or doctors who want to invest $5,000 a quarter. And so our Health Moonshot fund, which is called the Startup Health Moonshot Impact Fund, is designed to do that. And so it is an evergreen rolling fund, but we're incredibly excited about how many people want to now be involved in the success of the companies, not just by investing, but by actually collaborating with the companies.
This is very innovative. You mentioned, though, a doctor coming in for as little as $5,000 into the fund. So are there minimums?
Yeah. So if I didn't say by every quarter, I should have said every quarter. So yeah, there's $25,000 minimum a quarter. $100,000 a year is the minimum for our accredited investors. As a result of demand, a number of doctors who are also accredited investors but are not professional investors or professional angel investors or even active angel investors wanted to get involved. And so we have temporarily lowered the minimum for doctors and other clinicians to come in for $5,000 a quarter or $20,000 a year. Organizations and family offices, $250,000 a year. I'm sorry, a quarter, so $1 million a year. And the idea is that there's only a 4-quarter minimum commitment. And so at any time after those 4 quarters, you can pause or stop your investing without losing your limited partner position. You own whatever we own during the quarters you are an investor. And you could also increase or decrease as long as you're above the minimum every quarter or any quarter. And so that flexibility is really important, because now investors can, through this flexible quarterly subscription, decide how much they want to invest and actually increase it without having to have made that commitment at one point in time that might not be relevant later.
An individual that wants to scale back the investment, but they still meet the minimum, what time frame do they need to give you?
It's after the 4 quarters, they have a chance to do that every quarter. If they're above the minimum, they can do that at any time, even after their first investment.
Very, very innovative.
Yes.
So I commend you. So Steve, individual that wants to get more information on Startup Health, how would they go about do that?
So you can learn more about all of the companies and everything that we're doing at Startup Health at startuphealth.com. For investors, it's going to healthmoonshots.com. Although you can get to healthmoonshots.com from startuphealth.com, the landing page that we've designed at healthmoonshots.com, which we're doing in partnership with AngelList, is really meant to be an easy way to get right to the information about the fund, our investor deck. We have a bi-weekly webinar for investors to learn more. Every week or two, we're having this opportunity to have a dialogue and live conversation with potential investors or prospective investors. At startuphealth.com, you can learn a lot more about our portfolio companies. They, of course, go back and forth between them, but easiest way to find anything out.
Excellent. Steve, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Alan. It's great to be here.